Forget everything Hollywood showed you. The saloon girl wasn't a prop. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. She wasn't background decoration for some cowboy's story. She was the most dangerous operator in the room. And the system built around her was one of the most sophisticated exploitation machines in American history. This is going to get uncomfortable, because the truth about Old West saloon girls is nothing like the movies. Nothing at all. Imagine walking into a saloon in Dodge City, 1878. Smoke thick enough to chew. The smell of sawdust and spilled whiskey and unwashed men. And in the middle of all of it, a woman in a sequined dress smiling like she owns the place. She does, in ways nobody ever talked about. These are 20 facts about Old West saloon girls that history buried and Hollywood burned. Number 20. The drink that wasn't whiskey. Picture it. Dodge City, 1878. A cowboy slides a whiskey across the bar, winks at the girl beside him. She smiles. She picks it up. She drinks. He just paid 75 cents for cold tea. Every drink ordered for a saloon girl was dyed water. Cold tea in a shot glass, full whiskey price. She stayed stone cold sober all night. This wasn't a trick. It was official policy across hundreds of establishments. A drunk girl couldn't sell, couldn't dance, couldn't earn. Every warm, hazy saloon scene you've ever watched was a performance. Top to bottom, every single night. Number 19. The wages nobody expected. A successful saloon girl in the 1870s pulled in around $10 a week in base salary alone, before a single commission. A popular girl, averaging 50 dances a night, each ticket worth 75 cents to $1, could make more in one night than a railroad worker made in a full month. Legitimate work for women at the time paid about $1.50 a week. Laundry, cooking, teaching school. These women were, in many cases, the highest-earning women in their entire town. The respectable ladies across the street knew it, and they hated it. Number 18. The dance ticket machine. The drink wasn't even the main money engine. It was the dance ticket. A customer paid up to $1. The house split the proceeds with the girl. The dance lasted 90 seconds. Then the girl walked that man straight to the bar, sold him a drink, earned a commission on that, too, then back to the floor, then back to the bar. 50 times a night, in a corset, in heeled boots, on a hardwood floor. No sick days, no overtime, no sympathy. This wasn't entertainment. It was a full-contact, high-endurance sales job dressed up as fun. Modern bottle service clubs run the exact same system. The only difference is the shoes. Number 17. The slur that ended reputations. The term painted ladies sounds almost charming now. It wasn't. In Victorian society, makeup on a woman was not a fashion choice. It was a public confession. Wearing rouge meant one thing to every person who saw it: that you had placed yourself outside the boundaries of decent society. Permanently. Respectable women were pale, plain, and proud of it. So when saloon girls arrived with painted faces and bright dresses, the reaction wasn't just disapproval. It was visceral, communal, designed to destroy. But here's what the respectable women couldn't say out loud. Most saloon girls made that choice anyway, because virtue wasn't paying the rent, and the money was very real. Number 16. The fashion that was actually war. Saloon girls wore skirts that hit at the knee, in an era when showing an ankle was considered obscene. Bare shoulders, low necklines, sequins, fringe, silk, colored stockings, garters worn in public. To every proper woman in every Western town, this was a deliberate provocation. But here's what never gets mentioned. These same women were buying their own property, opening their own bank accounts, making their own financial decisions. Decades before women had the legal right to vote, saloon girls on the frontier were practicing a form of economic independence that their supposedly more respectable neighbors couldn't even dream of. The dress wasn't just fashion. It was a flag. Number 15. The women who had no other door. This one changes everything else on this list. Most saloon girls didn't choose this life as an adventure. They chose it because every other door was locked. Most were refugees, from farms, textile mills, abusive households back east. Many were widows, women whose husbands had died on the frontier, leaving them with nothing. No income, no family, no options. They were recruited by handbills, promising high wages, easy work, fine clothing. Some arrived expecting dancing, and left realizing what the job actually involved. They weren't villains. They weren't vixens. They were women in impossible situations, making the only decision that kept them alive. And almost none of them had a single person in their life who ever saw it that way. But it gets worse. Number 14. The hierarchy nobody talks about. Hollywood collapses all these women into one category. The real women absolutely did not. There was a rigid, fiercely enforced social hierarchy. At the top, dance hall girls, entertainers, saleswomen, performers, not prostitutes, and furiously offended to be treated as such. Below them, parlor house girls, higher-end establishments, a different world. At the very bottom, the crib girls. And we'll get there. You're not ready yet. A dance hall girl who was mistaken for a prostitute could react with genuine fury. That distinction was everything to her. The one line of respectability left in a world that had taken nearly everything else. Polite society refused to see any difference between them. They were all just fallen women. End of story. The cruelty of that erasure is hard to overstate. Number 13. The system built to keep her broke. Let's talk about the owner's cut, because this is where the exploitation shows its real face. The saloon owner marked up whiskey between 30 and 60% over wholesale. Then he charged the girl for her room, her costumes, her food, her makeup. He took his cut of every dance ticket, a percentage of every drink she sold. Her percentage came off an already inflated price she had no control over. The whole machine was engineered so that no matter how hard she worked, the house was always winning on multiple levels simultaneously. The worker took all the personal risk, performed all the labor. The platform took its cut from every transaction. Some business models are apparently timeless. Number 12. Love was bad for business. This one is quietly sinister. Saloon owners didn't just ignore their girls falling in love. They actively destroyed it. If a patron was spending too long at one girl's side, buying her drinks, showing signs of genuine attachment, the owner would intervene, reassign the girl, limit the man's access, ban extended conversation. Because the single greatest threat to a saloon owner's income was marriage. A girl who married left. A girl who left had to be replaced, retrained, re-promoted. So owners managed their girls' romantic lives like inventory. Emotions were a mechanical failure risk. Nobody ever told the girls this when they signed on. Number 11. Armed. Always. The image of a fragile saloon girl waiting to be rescued is one of the great lies of Western cinema. Most of them were armed. Pistols tucked into garters, daggers slipped into bodices, small derringers hidden in boot tops. This wasn't bravado, it was survival math. Lawmen in the Old West operated by an unofficial but very consistent rule. Disputes involving working women were not their problem. A girl who was assaulted inside a saloon had essentially no legal recourse. So they handled it themselves. There are documented accounts of saloon girls drawing on men twice their size and making the point clearly. That image, the sharp, armed, self-reliant woman of the frontier, is historically far more accurate than anything Hollywood ever put on screen. They just never found it convenient to show it. Number 10. The house rules. And they were brutal. The saloon had its own justice system, and it worked. Saloon owners required, genuinely required, that customers treat the women with a baseline of respect. Not out of decency, out of business logic. A girl who got roughed up couldn't work. A saloon with a reputation for tolerating violence lost its girls entirely. So consequences were severe. Permanent bans, physical removal at gunpoint, and, in extreme cases, men were killed by the keeper or by patrons who took offense. There's a recorded incident in Tucson. A man who crossed a line was escorted at gunpoint from bar to bar across the entire town until he had, quote, learned some manners. Old West justice was informal. It was rarely slow. Number 9. The Madam's Private Army. When official law offered nothing, some madams built their own parallel system. They hired private bouncers, men chosen specifically for size, reputation, and willingness to use force. Some high-end establishments ran what amounted to their own internal courts. Cross a line, and the consequences had nothing to do with the sheriff. Here's what makes this remarkable. These private systems actually worked better for the women than the official legal structure did. Rape, assault, and robbery against working women were almost never prosecuted in frontier courts. But cross the line in the wrong establishment, and you never made that mistake again. Private security has always filled the gaps that public law leaves behind. Number 8. The language built to hide the truth. Victorian society had a fascinating relationship with the world it was simultaneously consuming and condemning. It couldn't discuss openly what happened in the upper rooms of frontier saloons, so it invented a whole vocabulary to refer to it sideways. Soiled doves, horizontal employees, ceiling experts, ladies of the evening, sporting women. The establishments themselves were sporting houses, parlor houses, houses of accommodation. But here's what nobody says. This coded language wasn't just about modesty. It was a legal shield. As long as nobody said the actual word, the city government could keep issuing licenses, collecting fines, and maintaining plausible deniability. Everyone knew. Everyone pretended not to. A tradition that has continued, it must be said, robustly into the present day. And that's where the real hell begins. Number 7. The gold dust heist. In the mining towns of California, Colorado, and Nevada, some operations ran a sideline that was almost elegant in its simplicity. A girl would identify a miner who had come in flush, gold dust in his pouch, a good season behind him, enough whiskey in him to collapse a horse. She would work him carefully. Flattery, more drinks, a gentle invitation upstairs. Once he passed out, which was always the plan, she went through his clothes, his belt, his boots, and relieved him of his gold. Some madams didn't just permit this, they trained their girls to do it efficiently. The miner would wake up hours later, head pounding, gold gone, with only the vaguest memory of the night before. Most never reported it. Some didn't realize it had happened until they were 2 days down the trail. It was theft dressed entirely as hospitality. And it shows up in multiple independent historical accounts across different states. Number 6. The government's cut. Here is the fact that reframes the entire moral structure of the Old West. The government wasn't ignorant of what was happening in those saloons. It was profiting from it. City after city across the frontier issued formal licenses permitting these operations to continue. In many towns, working girls were required to pay monthly fines, sometimes around $8, directly to the city treasury. In St. Louis, a piece of legislation called the Social Evil Ordinance required permits for all working women and mandatory health checks from a city-appointed physician that they paid for out of their own pocket. The city was simultaneously criminalizing these women's existence and funding its own operations on their earnings. The line between law and exploitation wasn't blurred. In most frontier towns, it had been erased entirely. Number 5. The cribs. This is the part that stays with you. At the very bottom of the frontier hierarchy were the crib girls. Tiny single-room shacks on the outskirts of town, barely large enough for a bed and a small table, a red lamp burning in the window. The women who ended up there were the oldest, the most worn down by years in the life. The ones no parlor house or saloon would take anymore. They charged as little as $1. They had no bouncers, no madam, no protection of any kind. Violence was constant. Disease was everywhere. Syphilis moved through these communities like a slow fire. And there was no cure. As one historian noted, this line of work never had a good retirement plan. The cribs were where that retirement came to collect. Number 4. The debt that never reached zero. On paper, the wages looked like freedom. In practice, they were a cage. Most saloon girls arrived already in debt. The owner had paid for their travel, their costume, their room, their first week's meals. That debt was logged, tracked, and charged with interest. The costume was rented from the house. The room above the saloon charged weekly. The food deducted. Some owners deliberately kept the accounting opaque, just fuzzy enough that a girl could never quite get to zero. And as the months turned into years, the lifestyle itself became the trap. The noise, the smoke, the relentless performance, the constant threat of violence, the chronic back pain from dancing in a corset every night. The easiest solution the frontier pharmacist could offer sat on the counter. No prescription needed. It wasn't weakness that drove these women to addiction. It was arithmetic. Number 3. The makeup that was slowly killing them. Every single night they went to work, they were being poisoned. Not metaphorically. The cosmetics available to saloon girls in the 1870s were, by modern standards, medically catastrophic. Face powders were lead-based. Lip tints contained vermilion, a compound of mercury sulfide, which over time caused neurological damage, tremors, memory loss, skin deterioration. Some skin lighteners contained arsenic. Eye preparations used antimony. They applied it heavily, daily, for years. Here is the darkest part. They had no idea. The connection between these ingredients and the symptoms they were experiencing was not understood. They thought the trembling hands were just exhaustion. They went back to work and applied the makeup again. The most dangerous thing in that saloon every night wasn't the drunk with the pistol. It was the powder on the vanity. Number 2. The bottle the doctor handed her. In the late 1800s, laudanum was legal, cheap, available at any frontier pharmacy without a prescription. It was opium dissolved in alcohol. Doctors prescribed it freely for cramps, anxiety, headaches, insomnia, and practically anything else. By the late 1800s, women made up more than 60% of all opium addicts in America. The typical opiate addict of the Victorian era was not a criminal. She was a working woman whose doctor had handed her a bottle. For saloon girls, already exhausted, already in pain, already using alcohol to take the edge off each night, laudanum was the logical next step. Some madams actively encouraged it. An addicted girl was a dependent girl. A dependent girl wasn't going anywhere. By 1900, estimates put the number of opium addicts in the United States at 250,000. Nobody called it a crisis. Nobody launched a campaign. They just kept selling it over the counter. Some lessons, apparently, have to be learned more than once. Number 1. December. Every year, without fail. As December arrived in frontier towns across the American West, one number climbed. Documented historical records from the era show a sharp, consistent increase in suicides among saloon girls and working women every Christmas season. Think about why. Christmas was the one time of year when every human instinct screamed home, family, warmth, belonging. It was the cruelest possible reminder of everything these women had left behind, or lost, or never had. The letters home that were never answered, the children they'd had to give up, the mothers who had stopped writing. On top of that, illness was everywhere. Tuberculosis, syphilis, the slow damage of years of this life. All of it compounding quietly in the background. Hollywood ends its saloon girl stories with a sunset and a handsome stranger. History ends too many of them on a cold December night in a room above a saloon, with no one coming to knock on the door. These women were not props. They were not punchlines. They were not background decoration. They built economic lives in a world designed to give them nothing. They armed themselves when the law refused to protect them. They created their own hierarchies, their own codes, their own versions of dignity in conditions that were genuinely brutal. And the system that surrounded them, the owners, the city governments, the physicians, the pharmacists, profited at every single turn, while pointing the moral finger squarely at them. The saloon girl was never really about the saloon. She was about what happens when a society refuses to give half its population a fair hand, and then judges them for how they play the cards they're dealt. That story didn't end with the frontier. It just changed addresses. What fact broke you? Drop it below. Next time, we go somewhere even darker. You've been warned.